Hey friends, are you afraid to address that one thing in your life, even though you know that everything would be better if you did? Our guest today says it's time to open the door to change, no matter what mess waits for you on the other side. You're listening to Halfway There, episode number 364, Jason VanRuler and Willingness to Change. Hey friends, welcome back to Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. As always, I'm your host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm deeply grateful that you are here. I don't believe in coincidences. If you're listening to this episode, I know it's going to be one that will bless you, encourage you, maybe challenge you just a little bit. I hope so. That's what we're after today. Friends, as always, the best compliment you can give is tell a friend about this show. Text an episode to somebody, post it on social media, let them know that you really enjoy Halfway There and it's encouraging you on your journey. Would love that a lot. You can tag me if you post it on social. I would love to see that as well, and I often respond, so thanks for that. The other thing is, if you want and you're able, you can go to halfwaytherepodcast.com, hit that Patreon button, and you can help support this show. Some of you do that, really do deeply appreciate that as well. Okay, our guest today, let's jump right into our conversation. Our guest, he's a new author. He's got a book called Get Past Your Past, How Facing Your Broken Places Leads to True Connection. He's got experience as a clinician, a coach, a speaker, and he operates a multi-state private practice, which is pretty cool. I'm sure we'll hear all about that. Our guest is Jason VanRuler. Jason, welcome to Halfway There.
Hey, thanks so much, Eric. This is awesome. I'm honored to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
I'm excited to have you here. I'm really excited. I'm very curious about your book, which I'm sure is born out of some of the work that you're doing, because sometimes that whole thing of getting over the past is one of the biggest hurdles that we face, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a thing we either do or don't do, but always need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Okay. Well, it's kind of broad strokes to give you a few titles like that, but tell us a little more about kind of who you are, where God has you right at the moment.
Yep. So I do. Yeah. I mean, as he has kind of said, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach. This is my first book that I've published. And I've been doing some speaking. I've been a therapist now for a while. Before that, I was in the business world and actually was a recruiter and even did call center stuff. So lots of sales experience. And it really, in doing my own work, led me to this place. And so now I'm at this point in my career where it's really important to me to make an impact. So I'm trying to do that as best I can, and where I'm called. I'm married. I've got 3 kiddos, and of course, everyone thinks their kids are the best, and mine are, of course, the best. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I love it. That's great. Okay, so let's dive into your story. I know that you're currently in Nashville. Is that right?
I'm in South Dakota, which is often known as the other Nashville.
Oh, what did I see? Sorry, I saw here that it says, in 2018, you joined Bethesda Workshops in Nashville. So you were in Nashville?
Still, so I travel there. I'm there twice a month.
Okay, all right, that's how it goes. Gotcha. So I'm read into that, I guess. Sorry. So tell me about. Did you grow up there? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in South Dakota, and have lived here really most of my life. I lived a couple other places, but it was brief. And it's just it's a good place to be from, and a good place to jump off from to go to other places.
Yeah. What part of South Dakota?
Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Oh, Sioux Falls.
So
okay.
It would be on the eastern side.
It's on the Iowa side.
The biggest city, if you will. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. So I love that. 'Cause I'm from Des Moines, so that's really not terribly far. And certainly kind of culturally similar and all of that, right?
You get it. Yeah. Good old Des Moines. Are you still in Des Moines?
No, I live in Denver now. So
okay. The other Des Moines.
Yes. Right. I'm noticing a theme. So yeah, I grew up in Des Moines, went to Chicago for 7 years, and we came out to Denver to finish seminary. So that's kind of, and then we were here and we were like, there's no humidity. Why leave? So
Des Moines has humidity. Yes.
Anyway, so that's how we ended up. All right. South Dakota. That's cool. The thing I love about South Dakota is the sunflowers. Like, you guys grow amazing amount of sunflowers up there.
We do. And you know, what's fascinating about them, what I'm always pointing out to my kids is, like, when you drive down the road, they point to the sun. right? Like the sunflowers, it's this really cool thing to see, but like they actually orient themselves to the light. And I'm always thinking like, oh man, it seems like there might be some symbolism or message there. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not.
100%.
Maybe not at all. They're just plants, but yeah, tons of fields of sunflowers.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Well, if we want to spiritualize it a little bit, sometimes there's God has planted, he has put things in the world that teach us how to live with him, right? And I think that's one example where maybe we could do that. All right, there's probably something there. If I were a better speaker, we could figure that out, but that's good. All right, so you grew up in South Dakota. What was that like, a Christian family or?
Yeah. So my parents divorced when I was 8. So we kind of had this like super stable life, grew up in the church. And then after 8 was kind of question mark. And so we went from stability to instability. And really the rest of childhood was kind of lived in that season of just, kind of having a lot of volatility and instability and all of these things that, you're not supposed to have as a kid, with some church stuff laced in. Right. So there was, kind of the occasional church visit and things like that. But there just wasn't a lot of structure or system to it.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, what was your faith experience like?
I mean, as a kid, my faith experience was, I think I was really on track. And then I think when my life, really changed, it just kind of became something different. And I think as a kid, you really only have so many ways to try to explain something as an 8-year-old. And so I kind of thought, well, like I know what's being taught and I know what's happening and they're different. And so I'm not so sure about this whole deal.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that really led me to a place of kind of questioning, and just kind of saying like, yeah, this is maybe not actually where I'm supposed to be, and maybe not as helpful as I thought it would be. And so that was really tough, because I think it could have really changed everything to feel like I had that community. But it kind of led me to say like, oh, that's maybe just one of those optional things you might do if you wanted.
Yeah. So it sounds like you got a little disconnected, had some family chaos, and then got a little disconnected from church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So how did you find faith in Christ? When did that happen?
Yeah, so that was years later. And it's always interesting to me because I think God just finds you, or we think that God finds you, but it's like, oh, maybe it was there all along. But yes, maybe feels like he finds us sometimes. And so came out of childhood, was not really involved in church or even super interested in it. And yet the funny thing about me is I've always just known God was there as much as I didn't want to admit it. And so I think I just kind of moved away from that, relocated to somewhere else, in my spirituality was like, yep, that's just not part of my life. And then proceeded to just live in a way that just furthered all the brokenness I'd come from. And so I was like, well, it's a challenge to change kind of what I've come from and who I'm going to be. And so I'll just be this version of myself.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I had kind of this moment of like, this is not working. It wasn't until then that I think God kind of came back in a way. And then when God was like, yep, it isn't working. You are broken. And here I am. About that time, I just felt like it was a good time to pick a fight with God. I was like, okay, all right, if you're coming back now, that's great. Cause I got a bone to pick with you.
Let's have that out. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, okay.
You said so many interesting things there that I just want to dive into a little bit. I love the fact that you felt like God was always there. Like so you never like didn't believe in him. You just didn't think he was relevant.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. He was like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If like a hard thing happened, I'd be praying,
right.
But if it was like, hey, do you want to go to church on Sunday? I'd be like, nope. So there was this part of me, this very, for me, it was kind of just this, I don't know, maybe a way of being where like I knew the truth, but I was angry about what had happened. And so those two really couldn't exist at the same time.
Oh, sure. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. That's very interesting. And I'm really glad you said that, because I think because that makes more sense of what you said earlier about having that with God, right? Like it was sort of you were sort of passive aggressive with God. Like, I'm just going to ignore you now. Right. Like, okay.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
Definitely do what I did. Yes. replicate what I did. It is very healthy.
Well, okay. Yeah. But I think people do this, right? So like I wrote a little ebook, I guess it's on my website, called What to Do When You're Mad at God. Right.
Love it.
Because I think this happens to people way more often than we'd like to admit. Right. I think it is, I think it matters. And I think Scripture, the witness of Scripture, is that God can handle it, right?
Yeah.
That it's okay. So I went through Habakkuk in there, because in Habakkuk, he and God have it out, and Habakkuk ends in a place of worship. God is not bothered by Habakkuk's complaints and annoyance at his plan, right? He's very kind to Habakkuk. And so I think that's an interesting thing. But okay, so that's very interesting. You were like, okay, forget this. And you felt like you were kind of mad, but maybe just God was not just going to be a part of your life until it was time, until you decided it was time to have it out with him. So what was that situation like? And how did that go? And tell us that story.
So yeah, so how that came about was, I think for me, I had kind of this moment where I knew it wasn't working, and I actually even think I knew why, which was I was trying to really go against what I'd been called to, and where I think God was at. And so I think for me, what that was is it was about a real struggle to just lean into being vulnerable and just saying, like, I've really been hurt. And if you exist, God, and you love me and you allowed me to get hurt, I don't know what to do about that. Like, I don't know if I can live in that place. And so I think that was really the argument for me, is just, if you love me, why did I get hurt?
That's such a great realization, right? And so this is why I love to have that conversation, because I don't think many of us do, right? To have that conversation with God. We don't often get that honest. What made you get that honest with God?
I think it was just the depth of the hurt. I mean, I think for so long, like, I just closed myself off, just like a closed fist, super tight, like, just why? And then I think what I was actually holding on to was the pain. And so what was in that fist was just this pain of like, but then why? God, if you love me, if you're there, like, why did this happen? And so I danced around it, right? I mean, you said it so well. It's kind of passive aggressive about it. I remember, and I write about it in the book, where I'm just struggling. I this is before I really had much of a career, even doing anything. And so life is not going well. My marriage is really struggling, and I'm working in this place where I'm welding trailers. And so if you knew me at all, you'd be like, Jason should not have that job. That is not a good place for Jason. And so I'm in this trailer with this other dude, and it's, like 200 degrees. And I'm just like, God, I swear you off. Like, if you're there, like, what are you doing? How are you letting this happen? And I remember just like imagining that God would like somehow rip the top off the trailer and be like, here I am, Jason, just kidding. Sorry about all that. And instead it was just like crickets. And yet in my heart, I just knew, like, come on, And I think when I really look back, I have had God's voice in my life saying, come on, my whole life.
Yeah. I love that. See, this is so fascinating to me, because I think a lot of us want, and I've had people tell me these stories over the years on the show. A lot of us want those burning bush moments, right? Like, you were like, tear off the trail, just tell me the thing.
Make it obvious.
Yeah.
Real
just
obvious.
Do like, look, God, if you're God, then show up. And, and Elijah has an experience with the quiet voice, right? God was in the whisper. And I don't know, sometimes he's like that, right? And sometimes he is the burning bush, and sometimes he is the big thing that gets our attention. But I love that for you, it was that inner knowing, right? That inner speaking of the Spirit to your heart of, I'm here, I'm here. And he wouldn't let you kind of get away with requiring a sign, as it were.
Yeah. And as angry as I was about that, I also knew it was out of love.
Yeah. How did that, okay, so what did that do? Did that moment change your relationship with God at all? Did that, like, was there a shift in you or what happened?
Well, Eric, I quit the trailer job. I'm just telling you, I don't think I made it past the first day.
Really?
So I don't know if that's what God was going for, but I'm like, okay, God, I got the message. I quit the trailer job. I will not weld anymore for everyone's best interest. That won't happen. But I think what happened is that when I really listened to that and I heard it, and did my best to even just receive it, I started to soften a little bit, and that fist that was balled up so tight started to open. And so that didn't happen overnight, but I think over time I began to open that and to really just show God that, like, I was in so much pain, and that's why I had felt the way I felt.
Yeah. Okay. I love that, Jason. I love that you said that because, again, I think a lot of us want that instant moment. We want that instant kind of, I'm healed, yay, right? My arm grew back, whatever it is, like those kinds of moments. But it's almost, how often does it work that way? It almost never does.
Is it too much to ask for, though? Come on. Just, I want it instantly.
Right.
If I can be on a plane using Wi-Fi, I deserve instant gratification in my faith.
That's right.
Come on. Like, I get that.
That is kind of how we are. And I think that's how all people are. We want that, but God often heals us over time. And so take us into some of those things. Like, what were as you were kind of in that season, were there any milestones? Were there any things where you go, oh yeah, okay, that you felt like slowly and surely your heart was opening up to the Lord?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what that did is that slow opening led me back to church, and helped me to get connected to a community that got it. They understood, and they even made space for me to be angry. Right? They were just like, "Hey, wow, totally allowed to be really, really angry. That is totally fine." And yet here we are. And so there were times I remember where there would be a worship song, and it would just melt me. Because I didn't know how to say what I felt, but when somebody else did and I knew it, like, I could connect to that. And so there were those little moments, and those led to then being baptized again as an adult in the Missouri River. And so that would just obviously, I think, be beautiful for a lot of reasons. But for me, it was just this idea of kind of going to the source and just saying, like, it's going to be different now. And so for me, that probably was one of the most impactful moments for me that really led me to open up and just kind of step into who I was called to be all along.
I love that you found a place, you found a community that allowed you to be angry and have those moments when you're like, hey, is this really true? What, as you were wrestling through all those kinds of things and healing, what were what did you learn about yourself, and what did you learn about kind of who God made you to be? Because obviously you learned that he didn't make you to be a welder. That's apparently not going to be your gift.
That was very obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I was really surprised when you said that. I was like, that doesn't sound like, from what I've read about you, that doesn't sound like you at all.
No, I was not a welder. No.
Okay. So
no, that's not who I was.
So what did you learn about yourself, and how did that lead you into what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think for me, it was really a refining process. In so many ways, I think I had actually always known who I was. I had just covered it up with so many other things. And so it was almost, and it's kind of cliche about the quote, where it's, I get the marble and I set it free, about Michelangelo. But I really felt like I was essentially just kind of chipping away at who I really was. I always wish I could find it, and I think it might just be lost, but I literally have a photo of it. I have a journal that, because I've always really been a therapist at heart and dressed like one. So when I was 8, of course, I was journaling. And in this journal, I wrote who I want to be when I grow up. And what I said is, I want to be a psychologist. I want to live in a city. I want to have an office that has brick, and I want to write a book. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a therapist. I've written a book, got an office, live in the city. But I knew that at 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't know it at 20.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Why do you think that is?
Because I think life distracts us from the truth.
Yeah.
And I think God says, but here's the truth.
Yeah. Man, I love that. I think that is 100% true. Friends, I want to highlight that. And I just feel like I need to ask you, has that happened to you? Have you maybe given up on some things that life has made you give up on because of what you are? Not all of us are called to follow our fancies that we were from when we were 8, right? But sometimes there are things in us that we know, right? And so part of the process of the spiritual journey is having the courage to step into those things, right? To step into them and to let go of some of the identities. This is what the dark night of the soul does. So you kind of, sounds to me like you had this sort of long dark night of the soul, right? Like it was a long season, and then
I really leaned into it.
Yeah. Good job. But then but as you were coming out of that, that's where you started to discover yourself, which is what the dark night does. That's what the desert does, right? It
refines it.
That's right.
And I think, like you said so well, maybe not everybody said, I'd be an author when I was 8, and they forgot that. But I think even sometimes it's our values or our voice, or even just like parts of our personality that get covered up. So it might not even be so specific as a thing, but it might just be, I'm a really, caring person. And now I've become really cynical.
Yeah.
Things like that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So there might be things. This is what the spiritual desert does. You got to shed things, right? And God shows you who you really are. And so it sounds like this is your journey of finding those things.
Absolutely.
So then did you you find this journal? Like, did you go to school, or like how'd you end up?
Well, I was cured. I mean, obviously, immediately it was, just like that. Everything was perfect. No, what happened is then I met my wife. And so now it became even bigger than me. And so there was kind of like this, well, am I going to get better? Am I going to do the work? Am I going to change? And now it was like, and now I have this person. And this person, and I did, it was a God thing, but I mean, I picked somebody who was far less complicated, right? They were like, I kind of know where I stand. God and I are cool. Like we're okay. And so for me, it was like, am I going to show up not only for me, but for my marriage?
Yeah.
And so that added, I think, for me, some investment. And so I just continued to walk that out. I just, for the longest time, I just said, I'm going to say yes to the things. I'm not going to say no. I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to lean into the hard stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That is such an important moment, an important distinction, right? When you decide to say no. I can't tell you, I mean, I've got kids too, and nothing makes me more crazy than when my kids are just like no to everything I want to make for dinner, right? Like, just for a trivial example, right? No. Look, you got to eat something, and it's so frustrating. And I think we do that sometimes with our calling, with our with our things, and it's just saying no to things out of self-protection. And that moment when you shift to go, I'm going to say yes to a few things, I'm going to say yes to something that I want, is kind of huge. Saying yes is actually, it's a huge skill. It's a huge life skill. Maybe skill's not the right word. I'm looking for a different word, but you know what I mean? Like it's a huge moment for people on the journey.
Yeah. Because I think what we're talking about is actually willingness. And when we become willing, things can change.
Wow. Yes. Say more about that.
Well, I mean, I think that's, I know for me personally, for so many clients I work with, I mean, that really is the thing they wrestle with. It's interesting to me, but everybody I talk to that talks about an issue they're having, they almost always know like how they could solve it, or at least how to get in the ballpark of how to solve it. They might not know the exact, but they're like, I can get in the zip code even, or the area code. But that's not really the issue. The issue is often willingness to actually do that, to have the conversation, to say the thing, to listen, to do the thing we need to do. That willingness is usually what we're wrestling with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I was trying to think of like some scriptural examples of how this works out with people
I think of
sometimes.
Jonah. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you willing? Nope. What about now? No, thanks. What about now? Still working on it.
Yeah, right. Even after he went and did the thing, after he went and preached in Nineveh, he was like,
he's like, I gotta just tell you, even though I did that, still not willing.
yeah,
Still gotta let you know.
Still gonna sit out here and just gripe about it, right? Like watch the city burn.
And we do that. We do that. I mean, and it's comical in some ways, but I mean, it's also very painful sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really important. The willingness question is a really important one. So the question is, what are you willing to allow God to do in your life? Right? Like, that's interesting. By the way, this is not just a commercial for all the things, but I think we're you're bringing up all the things that I've written about over the years. So one of the other things I did is I created a 8-day Bible study. Right, 8 days. It's a slow Lectio Divina is what it is, and one of the ones I did is called Jesus is Willing. And it's based on the story where I forget if it's a leper or somebody, it's been a while, but the statement to Jesus is, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And he says, I'm willing. And he touches him, right? It's very interesting. Different situation, going different direction, but but
same thing. I mean, but there's still a lot of truth in that, because I think it's one thing to ask for something and another thing to receive it.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder sometimes if that's part of our issue, is that we don't think that God is willing to love us, to care for us, to feel like he will show up for us, especially when we've experienced those hard things, right?
Yeah, I think we end up kind of projecting our experience onto God. And I don't know that that's always so fair, but we say that this is how I've lived, this is what's happened. And so that is now projected onto who God must be. And we do that. And I think it's probably human nature to do that. But what we lose is we lose some of the authenticity of who God really is.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. Which is sort of that's kind of what it's all about, right? Is learning who he is and learning how to walk with him in life. It's pretty interesting. Wow, I love that. Okay, so this all started with you got married, so that's great. This is, but that's how that kind of shifted your perspective and your willingness to be like, I'm going to say yes to things. What? So I'm curious. And then, so is that then were some of the things you started saying yes to? Like you became a therapist and like you ran into that, or like how did all that go?
Yeah, I mean, I had previously dropped out of college, and so I had a job now. I was acted as a recruiter, and so I would recruit people for jobs, and I just felt like really called to help people to get through the thing that I was getting through, but I had no idea what to do because I was still kind of like, well, I know a couple of things, but not a lot of other things, and so that led me to say yes to going to school. That led me to say yes to going to seminary. That led me to say yes to getting, another certificate in addiction and to do just all the things. And as I did that, I always say like my career has been kind of selfish because I get to reap all the benefits. I get to learn all the things. And so not only did I get healthier, but I started to really, I think, see the opportunity and have the ability to meet people where they were at in those moments, in their own version of the trailer where they were welding, and to just say like, it's awful hot in here. Could we go somewhere else? And so that opened a lot of doors for me to just work with all different types of people on what if this thing that you went through or this problem that you have, what if that didn't hold you back and instead empowered you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing vision. I love that. Okay. So you always wanted to write a book. Why did you write this book, Get Past Your Past?
That's a really good question. I think over and over again, I would meet with clients from all walks of life. Literally in my career, I've been able to work with people coming out of prison, which has been super rewarding. And I've been able to work with people who, are Fortune 500, Fortune 100, all that stuff. But it's kind of always the same deal. right? It's always what we're talking about, some version of that in someone's life. Because if I said now, like, hey, Eric, what is a hard thing that keeps showing up in your life that causes a lot of problems? And I pause long enough, you know what it is. You know what it is.
Yeah.
And you know what your relationship with it is. And so what my thought process is, hey, like therapy can be very expensive for people and it can be difficult to access. And so what would I tell a person who had $20 and a little bit of hope?
Nice.
That's where the book came from.
I love that. Yeah, that's really good. Okay. And forced by Bob Goff too, which is pretty cool. That's pretty.
Yeah. Who's ever heard of that guy? Yeah.
Well, a few people.
A few people. Bob is amazing. Yeah. I'm grateful for him.
Are you connecting with him or did you just email him?
Well, I could have just called him, he's available. No, Bob has actually, so talking about that community that I got involved in right away, in doing that, I learned that the community was really the secret sauce to growth and change. It is like, would none of us really ever change or hold to that if we do it in isolation? It's just too hard. And it's actually not even what we're called to do. And so as I've walked this out, community has been really important. And over the years, that's included different people. But Bob's become part of that community for me. And one of those people who just said, why couldn't you do the thing? Why couldn't you write the book? Why couldn't you do the speaking? Why couldn't you do the thing? And I just never really had a good answer for him. I was always like, Bob, and so in doing that, it's really encouraged me to do some of these things. And so I was just super excited when he was willing to do that.
Yeah, boy, I love that. Such a great question. Isn't that the power of questions though? Right? Like the power, the power of questions is to open up and point out that you're believing something that maybe you have no business believing, right? Like there's wow, why couldn't you do that? Oh, well, I mean, I could, because then the only answer is, which I don't want to expend the effort, right?
Yeah,
but that's on
and that
you.
Feels bad. That feels bad to say. Yeah, nobody wants to say that.
I can't tell you.
And I remember meeting him and just expecting like he was, I don't know, going to tell me something very Yoda-like, and it was going to change my whole world. And so I kind of present all these doubts and why I kind of want to, and I don't know. And then he just hits me with the question, well, why couldn't you?
Yeah.
And I think actually he stole that from God's playbook, because I think God does the same thing. Why couldn't you?
Yeah.
I think you can. So why couldn't you?
I was writing today I was trying to address some of the fears that stop people from podcasting, right? So one of the things that I do is I help people start and grow their podcasts so that they can get them off the ground. But a lot of people, I've been kind of engaging people on social, trying to figure out why haven't you started your show yet? The answer is almost always fear, right? I'm just afraid. I'm afraid nobody's going to listen to it. And so I was writing it that like, you have to overcome the fear. Like you have to just do the thing. Cause even though you're afraid, that's where the power is, right? Doing the thing afraid, and asking that question, why couldn't you though? Right? You could figure it out. You could do it well. You might stink at it your first 50 episodes. Welcome to the club, right? But you'll be better and you'll develop skills. That's one of the things that really helped me, was to realize that these are skills, right? And once you work on skills, they're like muscles and they grow over time.
Yeah. And fear, I mean, fear is a teacher. It teaches us things if we lean into it. Wow. And so we have to, size up the risk in doing some things. I wouldn't say like, oh, go, get a second mortgage on your house and spend all your money on this. And, if you're afraid, don't worry about it. Probably not, right? We'd probably want to take a little more calculated risk, but I think fear does teach us things. And then I think it's okay to suck. Like people say to me, they're like, Jason, you've got this Instagram audience and it's so big. And how long did that take you? You must have like built that right away. And I'm like, well, my first post that got 100 likes was my 280th post. Before that, I was just throwing videos into the wind. I was double waving. I was, poorly lit. and barely showing up. And so I think when we have willingness to say, like, I'm willing to suck at this for a while, we almost always get better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that maybe willingness, maybe one of the things to get past your past. You talked about community as well. What else? Like if somebody's wanting, like I love this whole section about rediscovering control. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Like what is it that we think our past? I think I understand where you're going there. I think what is it that we get? How is it that we give up control? I guess maybe is what I'm asking. And like, how do we rediscover that?
I think we let our experiences or the things be what they are without looking at them. And then we try to live around them instead of dealing with it. We just sort of say, like, I don't know about this. If you ever had this, but you'd go to your friend's house as a kid and they'd be like, well, don't go in that room. We don't go in that room because that room's a mess, or that room's off limits. Or we start to do that in our own life where we say, oh, I don't go over there. I don't talk about that thing. I don't look at that thing. And what happens is now that thing is starting to control us.
You know what's so fascinating about that? That is so true. And that's interesting. I'd never considered that concept. We have things that we have accepted, right? We just accepted as that's part of my life.
Yep.
Interesting. How do you see? So then that's where the willingness to change comes from, right? It comes into play. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's to turn the handle on the door and open it up, and to say, well, I guess that's how it looks. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah, and to accept reality.
Yeah, and to say, okay, now what?
Yeah. What do people need to do once they do that?
I think they need to identify who they can ask for help. So when we do that, the chances are we have an idea about the help we need, but not how to actually walk that out. And so I think if you've opened the door to that room and you're looking in it and you see the thing or the things, I think the next thought is kind of like, well, who's a good person to tell about this? Because it's not going to be everybody, right? Not everyone's going to understand everything all the time, or want to, or be willing to. And so I think the next kind of step is like, well, who would I tell about this? Or at least who could point me to somebody I should tell about this?
Yeah. Yeah, which is very interesting. I think that's the hard part, right? Is we feel like we need to have that all kind of closed up, and then, it's hard to ask for help.
Absolutely. And some of us have had times where we really have asked for help as kids or in the past, and it's ended badly. And so we have like really good reason not to want to do that. And still we need to do it. So, I mean, there's room to be like, but Jason, you don't understand. If you live like I live, I've never been able to get, like, all that's probably true. And yet it's not going to get better unless we let somebody in on it.
Yeah. And that's where that community comes in, right? We need community.
Yeah. But I think you can even start with God. I think you might open the door to the room, look at the thing, and then just pray and say, hey, God, you're the first person I want to tell about this. I just opened the door and here's how it looks.
Wow. Friends, what might change in your life if you did that today, right? If there's one thing that you wanted to do, that you want to address, you want to open the room, you want to look at it. Man, I don't know. But here's what I do know. I know that God is not surprised. He's not concerned. Even if it's sin is overcomable, right? The cross proves that. So that is, there's nothing that he can't overcome. I love that. Wow, that's good. All right, Jason, I think that's great. I think there's a lot there. People can get past your past on Amazon or wherever you get books. I've got links at halfwaytherepodcast.com as well. Your website, look at I was checking out your Instagram after you mentioned it too, is like you're really active there. That's fantastic. I love it. Your website is jasonvr.com. So when you start doing like virtual therapy and you're a hologram, that's gonna be perfect. I think it'll be good. But that's
that's awesome. I've never thought about it that way, but I am ready for the future.
You're so ready. I literally saw a thing today where that's what Google's working on. It'll be Zoom will be so much cooler. Anyway, jasonvr.com. So that's where you guys can find and connect with Jason. And of course, all those links, if you're driving right now, it's all at halfwaytherepodcast.com in the show notes. Jason, thanks for the conversation. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
I'm just grateful that you had me on. This was so wonderful just to talk about this stuff. And I think I would just tell people, you know, if you're listening to this and you're doing the thing where you're too much or not enough, right? Like my problem is too bad to deal with, or it's not bad enough to deal with. I think I just say, like, let's not do that. Like, let's just open the door and deal with it. Let's not do that funny thing we do where we have to judge the thing before we deal with it. Let's just show it to God and say, like, hey, what's the next step?
Yes and amen. I love that. He can handle it and he will see you through. Jason, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Eric.